Last week I finished reading this book, The Bee Sting by Paul Murray. I am still trying to figure out if I liked it or not. I finished it almost a week ago. I still don't really know. I have seen a ton of good things about this book. Some people that I know have read it. I was influenced by Jack Edwards to buy it and read it. He raves about it. It was one of the best books of 2023 for the New York Times Book Review. It was nominated for the Booker Prize. I can see why. But there are also some one-star reviews on Goodreads that I happen to agree with. So I've decided I'm going to yap about it on the internet until I figure out if I liked it or not. Book Yaps with Ash. So before I get into that, The Bee Sting is a Irish family saga. It follows 4 characters in the Barnes family. The daughter, Cass, who is, I think, 17. The younger son, PJ, who's about 12. The mother, Imelda, and the dad, Dickie. Each of these characters has their own fully fleshed out voice. You get all of their perspectives throughout the book. They each have something a bit different going on in their life, but there's one main plot point that floats through the whole book, and that is a recession that is causing their business, which is a car dealership, to fail. So we're pretty much getting the story along that one timeline, but you also get some flashbacks, which helps you understand the characters of the parents a little bit more. I think what makes this book really good and worthy of being nominated for these prizes is the writing style and the distinct voices of the characters. Imelda, the mom, is written completely without punctuation, so everything is a run-on. There are no page breaks, and it really puts you right in the shoes of someone whose life has gone out of control, who is constantly anxious all the time, who never has a second to stop and reflect or think or digest. And that was really interesting to read. The son PJ's chapters are written with a lot of page breaks, which kind of implies that he's too young to really overthink or overanalyze anything, and he's just convinced of one thing, and that's it. The daughter, Cass, is dramatic, as a 17-year-old girl is. She kind of lacks critical thinking or empathy. And then the dad, Dickie, he seems to really care about his family, and you see that through his perspective, but he also is completely oblivious to a lot of things. And each of these characters, you can totally tell whose perspective you're reading, because they're all very unique. So yeah, I found the way that this book was written to be very experimental, to be very interesting. There was engaging plot points for sure, but it really dragged. And I just wanted to be done reading it. It took me 3 weeks, which is a long time for me. That being said, yeah, it's deceivingly long. It's like 600 pages. Anyways, so I went to ChatGPT. I said, hey, Chat, can you help me figure out if I like this book by writing me some prompts and giving my answers scores so I can just do the math and figure out if I liked it or not. So my good friend Chat did that for me and wrote me some questions. So I'm gonna read the questions. So let's do that. Question 1. This book evoked strong emotions, joy, discomfort, sadness, curiosity. I would disagree. I'm gonna say no. Okay, no, I'm gonna say yes. There were a handful of moments that really evoked a strong feeling. There was really beautiful writing. There was some more hard to read dark chapters that gave some characters some depth and were a little bit on the sadder side. So I would say yes, it did. So I'm going to say somewhat agree, which is 1 point. Question 2. Certain themes or moments have stayed with me since reading. Yes, I've been thinking about this book on and off since I finished it about a week ago. There are some specific scenes that I do think about more regularly, especially the end of the book, which I won't spoil, but it was pretty ambiguous. So I would say strongly agree for that. 2 points. Question 3. I was emotionally engaged most of the time, not bored or distracted. Disagree. 0 points. The thing with it being written in 4 different voices is that some chapters, PJ's or Cass, I found them really engaging. I was interested. I wanted to know what was happening, and they were easy to read. Imelda, her chapters just went on and on and on, and there was no breaks, and it was all flashbacks. It was important to the story, but I also really wanted to get back to the main story, so I found her chapters very difficult to read. And that's what I remember more than the ones I was engaged with. I also really read this book in like short chunks. Yes, I was tired in my life. I was busy, but I was falling asleep reading it. And I think that there's like a 50-50 of me being tired in my life and also the book being on the more challenging side to read, not really being a page turner, which, you know, everyone is different. Jack Edwards says the pages turn themselves. They did not. They were heavy pages that did not turn themselves. Okay. I found at least one character compelling, complex, or emotionally real. 100% agree. All 4 characters felt very real. They were very fleshed out. They had, like I said, they had their own voice. They were very intriguing. I do think that's what makes this book really good, was the characters, the development, their storylines. How the storylines were revealed to you, for sure. Number 5, I looked forward to certain characters' POV/storyline. Also agree. Maybe I was just looking forward to being done Imelda's storyline and reading her punctuationless nightmare. But I looked forward to PJ, and maybe that again was the multiple page breaks that made it feel easier to read. But his story was also just very intriguing. It was anxiety inducing. He was making some choices that made you go like, don't do that. So I'd say I look forward to him, so I will put strongly agree for that. Next question. The relationships in the book felt layered, messy, or meaningful. I would agree with that. Again, strong character. The relationships were messy for sure. There was miscommunication. There was a lack of empathy, lack of understanding. Just them not really knowing each other. But that was intentional for sure. And so, yeah, I would strongly agree for that. The book explored ideas like guilt, climate change, class, or family in ways that made me think. I would say somewhat agree. I had heard before reading it that it dealt with the climate crisis in an interesting way. The idea was that it weaved throughout the book. I feel like it really only came forward in the last like 2/3, maybe the last third. But definitely the idea of family, the idea of class, the idea of guilt for sure. So, yeah, now that I'm saying this, I was going to say somewhat agree, but I think actually I'm going to put strongly agree. I found the book's structure, long to short chapters and shifting timelines, effective or interesting. So, yes, what Chad is saying here is that the book itself starts with very long chapters for each character. You get like a good chunk, especially Imelda, you get a good chunk for each of them, getting to know them, getting their story. As the book goes on, let me show you. By the end, you're getting basically like paragraphs from each character. So not even a chapter, like paragraphs of things kind of coming together, but you're getting little pieces of it from each of the characters, which I found very interesting. Again, it was like experimental, and I think it was like well executed. It just wasn't like an experience I enjoyed. Like I didn't enjoy reading it. The really long chapters, they felt really long. I did like the short ones. The shifting timelines were obviously important to the story, but again, they were long. They probably could have been cut shorter. So yeah, I did find them interesting. I don't know if I found them effective because it kind of ruined the experience. So I'm going to put somewhat agree. I was impressed by the writing style or found it memorable. I guess for Imelda, yes, because of the lack of punctuation. I haven't read anything like that. But again, it's not a great experience to read that. I think that the writing style itself was very lyrical. It was interesting. I don't know if I find it memorable though, because even now I'm trying to think of something that isn't just Imelda's punctuationless story. Yeah, he writes in a way that makes you think. He writes in a pretty, like I said, lyrical way. I don't know if I would say for sure memorable, so I'm gonna again say somewhat agree. This book aligned with the kinds of stories or themes I usually enjoy. So I am working to expand my literature knowledge and exposure, which is why I picked this one up. It's not a book that I would have read the back and chosen to buy. So no, I typically gravitate towards horror or thriller or even sci-fi plot-driven stories, which this is not. That being said, I also really love a character-driven story. Stephen King's a great example of both of those things, horror and character-driven. There was some queer themes, again, the climate crisis was talked about. I do like that being included. But I think for this question, I'm going to say no. Disagree. Doesn't really align with what I typically enjoy. It was more of a challenge. I accepted the challenge, I completed the challenge, and now we're here, yapping on the internet. I enjoyed the process of reading it, even when it was challenging or slow. No, I don't think so. Sometimes yes, but not when it was challenging or slow. So, if the question is, I enjoyed it, even when it was challenging, then no. I don't want to challenge, I want to relax. It's my own fault. Right? Like, there's no one to blame but me. We shouldn't even be we shouldn't be blaming the book. We should be blaming me. Anyways, moving on. I would recommend this book to someone, at least the right kind of reader. Yes, I would recommend this to someone who likes contemporary literature, who is interested in a character-driven story. I do think it's a well-written book. Like, the author is talented. The author is good at what he does, and what he was trying to achieve, he achieved it. So I would recommend this to anybody who is interested in literary fiction, who's interested in a family saga, who likes to read big fat book. And so yeah, I would say agree. Strongly agree with that. I've continued to think about it after finishing. Yes and no. Little bit yes, little bit no. First couple days I was still thinking about it. Now I've been thinking about it in the context of planning to make this video, if that makes sense. There are a few things that I've thought about here and there from this book. Honestly, I've just been happy to be done it. I've finished 2 other books since this one, so that's been nice. Variety. So I'm gonna go somewhat agree. 1 point. And the last question, I'm curious to read more from Paul Murray. I'm gonna say no. No offense, Paul. I'm sure you're great, Paul, and there are lots of people who love it, so don't worry about what I have to say. I'm irrelevant. I think that, like I said, if I read this synopsis at the bookstore, I probably wouldn't buy the book. I was influenced to read it, so I'd have to be influenced to read a different one by him. But just knowing the challenge of reading the book, that it doesn't come easy to me, it's not easy to digest, I probably wouldn't reach for it unless I was looking for another challenge. So I'm gonna put disagree. Okay, so chat said scoring, if I get 0 to 9, it's not a fit. I found it more frustrating than rewarding. If I get 10 to 17, mixed or ambivalent, you saw some value, but it didn't quite work out for you. 18 to 23, you liked it overall, though it may have had flaws or didn't fully land. And 24 to 28, you really liked it, struck a meaningful chord with you. So now I've got to do some maths. Results are in, people. Here we go. Alright. When it comes to the bee sting and me, the most important person's opinion on this book sat in the middle. With a total of 16 points, which means that I had mixed or ambivalent feelings. Some value, but it didn't quite work out for me. I think that makes sense. I think that aligns with how I was feeling. I think that there were good things about it. I do think it's a really well-written book, but for what I'm looking for to get out of a book, to get out of reading, didn't super align with what I was looking for and what I'm typically looking for. That being said, if you like a challenge, if you like literary fiction, families, characters, blah, 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 you'll like this one. If you like a thriller or a horror or a plot, you won't, so pass on it. And now you know the truth. Thank you for sitting here and listening to me figure out if I liked it or not. Turns out I knew it all along. It was all up here. Okay, that's it. Cheers, love.